Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. I'm Dr. Uzma Amin, Assistant Professor of Dermatology of Department of Nuruddin Medical College, Lahore General Hospital. Today is our 4th year's first lecture of dermatology, which is about the introduction about the basic skin structure and functions which are related to the manifestations on the skin. So we will cover the detailed anatomy and physiology. The learning outcome of this lecture will be to have a concept of all the structures of the cells in the skin, of the basic skin and appendages of the skin, and a concept about the functions of the skin which are affected if there is any dermatological disorders. The system is divided into the skin and mucosae, hair, glands, nails, nerve endings. As the skin being largest organ of the body, it depicts any disorder is related to the systemic or any internal abnormality. So it is joined with every organ to perform a specific function. This shows the basic concept of the skin and its appendages. The upper layer, epidermis, dermis and hypodermis. These are the three basic divisions of the skin according to their structures and functions. These are the appendages: hair, associated glands, sweat glands, and various nerve endings, blood vessels and fat. We will discuss them in detail as well. Starting with the anatomy of the skin, we will discuss about its layers and the cells found in each layer. The basic division is into three layers: epidermis, dermis and subcutaneous tissue. Epidermis has a cellular layer which has different types of the cells arranged in a specific pattern, and dermis is a thicker connective tissue layer, and hypodermis is a subcutaneous blood having blood muscles and bones and fat. So we will start with epidermis, which is a keratinized squamous epithelium. This epidermis is present everywhere all over the body and in the mucosal linings. This has 5 distinct layers of the cells according to their architectural organization, and there are main 4 cell types in all these layers. These 5 layers are stratum corneum, stratum lucidum, granulosum, stratum spinosum and stratum basale. Then is the dermis. This is the ultrastructure view of the layers of the epidermis and their cells. We will discuss about them in details, which are the keratinocytes, Langerhans cells, melanocytes and Merkel cells. There are main 4 cell types. According to their function we will study. Keratinocytes, melanocytes, Merkel and Langerhans cells. The most abundant type of the epidermis is the keratinocytes, which are involved in the keratin synthesis, which are important for the skin barrier function, protection from external invaders, and they undergo continuous replication, mitosis and repair because they are produced from the stratum basale and they move upwards. The average life cycle ranges from 25 to 45 days. 8% of the epidermal cells are melanocytes, which are involved in the pigment production, which are important in imparting the skin color. They are present in stratum basale, and with their branching or dendritic processes they transfer the pigment to all the layers which is melanin, which is brownish to blackish depending upon the race, which is but the melanocytes cannot divide. Once damaged, they cannot repair themselves, and they can be damaged from the UV light or intense light or after deep trauma. Melanin is a protective layer. It imparts a shielding effect from the UV light. The clinical disorder which has associated loss of melanocytes is called albinism. 8% of the epidermal cells are melanocytes, which are involved in the pigment production, these are melanocytes present in the basal layer. They transfer with their dendritic process. These melanosomes having pigment, they transfer the melanin to the keratinocytes upper layer, but the melanocytes are present in ratio of 1:8 in the stratum basale. Also present in the stratum basale, which are attached to the keratinocyte by desmosomes, and they are involved in the sensory function, in perceiving the sensations, touch sensation. They are attached to a Merkel disc. Also present in the stratum basale, Langerhans cells are the first line immunity cells in the epidermis and all the mucosae, because they encounter every organ first of all before it enters the body. These are star-shaped cells which arise from bone marrow, and through blood vessels they migrate to epidermis, and with their epidermal dendritic cells they can also transform to the macrophages, interact with WBC, which are helper T cells, and whenever there is their abnormal proliferation, it is called histiocytosis. This is the histopathological view, how the skin biopsy will be visible in a histopathological section. This is the nuclear layer, stratum corneum. This is the stratum lucidum, which is a clear space between stratum corneum and stratum spinosum. The upper 3 to 4 cell layer is stratum granulosum, which has diamond shaped dark cells. Then stratum spinosum, which have polyhedral cells. This is a 7 to 8 layers thick, and the stratum basale, which has columnar layer and rests over the basement membrane. So these were the 5 layers of the epidermis which we saw in the histopathological view. Stratum corneum has dead cells because they are anuclear and they are filled with keratin, and they are important for imparting barrier function to the underlying cells. They are continuously shed, and when they are increased, there is increased shedding. This is called scaling, exfoliation. They are important in barrier against light, heat and bacteria, and there may be abnormality of the blisters below them, which is called subcorneal blister. Stratum lucidum is a clear space because it has the 3 to 5 rows of clear flat dead cells, which is below the stratum corneum, but this is present only in the skin of palms and soles, and it has keratohyalin granules in the cells. Stratum granulosum have 3 to 5 rows of flattened cells which have darkly staining keratohyalin granules, and they secrete glycolipids to extracellular spaces to slow the water loss. The stratum spinosum is spiny layer because it has polyhedral cells. These have 8 to 10 rows thick, and they appear as spiny because they are on histopathological processing. They shrink and they remain attached to their desmosomes, so they get visible as spines on the surface. They have melanin granules in them, and stratum basale is the source of the stratum spinosum. Stratum basale is the lowermost, deepest layer of the epidermis, which has columnar cells, and which is present in the single rows, and they have a rapid mitotic rate, and they also have associated Merkel cells and melanocytes. This shows again the overview of the layers of the epidermis, 5 layers. Now come to the dermis, which is below the epidermis. It is made up of the connective tissue, which imparts flexibility and strength to the skin, and also has collagen, elastic and reticular fibers. The cells of the dermis comprise fibroblasts, macrophages, mast cells, which have different functions. It also has dermis contains nerves, blood vessels, lymphatics, and various type of the skin appendages like the sebaceous glands and sweat glands are present in dermis. And dermis may be divided into 2 layers, papillary layer and reticular layer. Papillary layer, which has finger-like projections into the epidermis, and it has vessels to supply the oxygenation and nutrients to the epidermis. And the reticular layer, which is predominantly having various types of the fibers, collagen and elastic fiber, reticular fibers and connective tissue. The papillary layer has capillaries, and it also has sensory receptors like Meissner's and corpuscles, and this is also important in imparting the fingerprints because of these ridges. It has a lot of clinical relevance. Reticular layer has connective tissue, and collagen fibers impart strength to the skin. It also is a reservoir of water because of the blood vessels and connective tissue, and the loss of elastic or reticular fibers leads to stretch marks on the skin, which are called stria distans. Some clinical relevance to this anatomy is that the skin color is because of the melanin, keratin and hemoglobin, which combine attribute and make the various types of the colors. We'll discuss later on in the slide where are the 5-6 types of the skin. So the skin has a very important role in imparting the type of the color. Race is also determined by the amount of melanin. Local accumulation of melanin results in freckles and pigmented moles. Ultraviolet light stimulates melanin production. Keratin is formed from vitamin A and deposits in stratum corneum and imparts orange tone to the skin. This melanocytes, which transfers the melanosomes and imparts the color. Then the blushing redness is maybe because of the vasodilation. Pallor and blanching is because of the low hemoglobin and low blood pressure. The jaundice, which depicts in the skin, is also links to the systemic disorder. The bronze coloration of Hydison disease is also picked on the skin examination. Blue and black color may occur because of the trauma, blood vessels. Hair color is determined by the melanin. White color is because of the melanin along with the air bubbles in the medullary hair shaft. Function of hair. The main function of hair is the protection and sensation. The normal hair loss is 70 to 100 hair follicles, hair fibers shedding per day. The hair is composed of two main portions: the hair shaft, which is visible outside the skin, and the root. The root is present in the dermis, and it has three layers: inner medulla, middle cortex, outer cuticle. And the medulla has 2 to 3 layers of the polyhedral pigmented cells. The root is surrounded by hair follicle. Hair may be vellus hair or terminal hair. Vellus hair are fine hair, and terminal hair are coarser hair, axillary and pubic region, which may grow or increase in number in response to androgens. In the dermis, the root of hair is surrounded by hair follicle, and this bulb is the enlargement at the end of the hair follicle, which has a finger-like budding which is harboring the blood vessels. It is called a papilla. Erector pili muscle is smooth muscle which is located in dermis and is attached to the hair shaft. This is involved in frightening and emotional responses where the hair get a vertical position. Coming to the glands of the skin, there are two main types of glands: sebaceous and sudoriferous glands. Sebaceous glands are involved in sebum production, which are connected to hair follicle, and the sebum contains fat, cholesterol, protein, keep the hair and skin from drying out and forms a barrier of the oil over the skin, but their abnormal secretion may lead to whiteheads, blackheads and acne, rosacea-like disorders. This shows the whitehead, which is a closed comedone when there is accumulation of keratin or sebum under the skin, and blackhead is the open comedone, which when the exposed to the surface gets black. Sudoriferous glands are exocrine glands because secretions are deposited over the skin. There are two types of them: eccrine and apocrine. Eccrine are involved in the sweat production. They are more predominantly over the axilla, palms, soles, and the secretion is 99% water, but their regulation is by the sympathetic nervous system. This is the sweat gland, coil-like structure present in the deeper dermis, and the duct opens over the surface. Apocrine gland is present in axillary and pubic region, which is modified sweat gland, and its opening is in the hair follicle. It is also involved in body odor when it is affected by the bacterial proliferation. Ceruminous glands are the modified apocrine glands which are present in external auditory canal, and they are involved in production of the earwax, which is a protection from foreign body entering into the ear. Skin appendage, which is ectodermal in origin, and it is also produced by the epidermal cells. The main structures of nails are nail plate, root, lunula, nail bed. Nail plate is the major portion of the nail which is visible, and lateral nail fold is the skin fold around the nail. The lunula is a moon shape, crescent shape, white region at the distal end, and the cuticle is the protective layer between the nail plate and the rest of the skin of the distal phalanx. This is the nail root, which is present in the skin, and the nail plate rests over the nail bed, which is more visible in the cut section. The underlying epidermal cells are nail bed, and this space between the nail plate and nail bed is called a hyponucleum. Nerve endings are involved in sensory functions which are present in form of Pacinian corpuscles, which are sensitive to pressure and stretch, Meissner's corpuscles, which sense touch and vibration, hair root plexus, and free nerve endings. These are various types of the nerve endings having different sensations. Nerve endings are involved in sensory. Third layer is hypodermis, which is below the dermis, and it is mainly a reservoir of fat cells and blood vessels. It's also used clinically to give subcutaneous injections. So the clinical relevance of these appendages may be there is sebaceous hyperplasia leads to enlargement of sebaceous glands, which is visible in rosacea, acne. Seborrheic dermatitis is due to increased activity of the sebaceous gland and inflammation around them. The abnormality of basal layer malignancy leads to basal cell carcinoma. The keratinocytes abnormal proliferation leads to squamous cell carcinoma, and melanocytes malignancy is called malignant melanoma. Coming to the functions of the skin which are affected when there is any dermatological disorders, especially when there is widespread involvement of the skin. So there are sensations, heat regulation, absorption, protection, excretion, and secretion. Just to memorize, you can get this abbreviation. Skin protects us from excessive UV light, from bacterial invasion, and collagen and elastic fibers protect from injury. And skin also is a first line defense against invaders. Due to the Langerhans and macrophages, we may be protected from many opportunistic infections. So skin and mucosae, they are the front line defenders. And skin also forms a layer all over the body to prevent dehydration. When there is involvement of the skin, like in Stevens-Johnson syndrome, erythroderma, there may be disturbance of the fluid, electrolyte, and temperature regulation, because skin is important in thermoregulation of the body. This is carried about by evaporation of the sweat from surface, which leads to cooling effect, vasodilation, which dissipates heat, vasoconstriction, which conserves the heat, and insulation due to fat layer and hairs. The thermoregulation is the most important function of the skin, which is lost if there is widespread involvement of the skin due to any disorder. Sensation is important to prevent stimuli like temperature, pain, pressure, and touch. Skin excretes various amounts of the waste products like ammonia, uric acid, salt, ketones. Then the smell also occurs due to these waste products, and it is being a reservoir of blood and fat. Due to blood, it has 8 to 10% of the total flow of the cardiac output, and this is increased more if there is erythroderma, which is a systemic manifestation. Due to systemic manifestation, skin is more than 90% involved and erythema and scaling occurs. So it is also a reservoir of water. In conditions of increased demand, you see the patient may get dehydrated look because of the skin. If there is loss of water from the body, the skin gets shrunken. Synthesis of vitamin D is also very important function, which may be lost if the patient is having chronic cutaneous disorder, like is so in erythroderma, in photosensitive disorders, and this is carried about by the UV light, and it is then modulated in the liver and kidney, finally to form the calcitriol. But the first step occurs in the skin. With vitamin D, you all know that it's involved in the absorption of calcium from the gut, and it deposits calcium in the bone. In nowadays, the skin has got most attention due to its aesthetic role in patients, in a person's aesthetic appearance, because the skin may be of 6 types depending upon the color and amount of melanin in the body. Type 1, 2 fair complexions, 3, 4 whitish or Asian skin, and 5, 6 are the Africans or dark skin complexion. So this is also involved in personal identity, which is nowadays getting very much important due to the identification involved required in banking processes, identification related to the disorders which are affecting the epidermis, which is lost. There is dermatoglyphics. These are formed due to the papillary layer of the epidermis. So this is an overview about the structure and function and their clinical significance. Unless we know about these cells in the epidermis and their various types, we cannot fully understand the pathogenesis of the various morphological disorders of the dermatology. Thank you very much.